If you've ever been made to feel like your dreams are less important than someone else's demands, or if you've ever had to sacrifice a piece of yourself for family and gotten nothing but silence in return, then you need to hear this story. It's about how I lost everything I ever built, only to get it back in a way no one, least of all my own parents, ever saw coming. And before we get into it, do me a favor and hit that like button and subscribe to the channel because your support means the world to me. Now, let's get into it. The air in my parents' living room was always the same. It was thick with the scent of old books, my mother's lavender potpourri, and 2 decades of unspoken resentments. It was the kind of air that was easy to breathe in, but felt heavy in your lungs, like you could never quite exhale all the way. On that Tuesday afternoon, it felt heavier than ever, charged with the oppressive humidity of a coming storm. My father, Arthur, sat in his worn leather armchair, the one that had molded perfectly to his shape over 30 years. Since the accident, it had become less a piece of furniture and more a part of his body, an extension of his immobility. My mother, Helen, stood by the mantelpiece, her fingers tracing the frame of a photo of a smiling, much younger version of themselves. She wasn't looking at the photo, though. Her eyes, sharp and clear, were fixed on me. I stood in the middle of the room, on the Persian rug whose patterns I had memorized as a child, feeling like I was 10 years old again, about to be reprimanded for tracking mud into the house. But I was 32. I was a chef. I was the owner of the Gilded Spoon, a restaurant I had poured my blood, sweat, and every last cent I had into. A restaurant that had just been nominated for a James Beard Award. I was supposed to be a success story, but in that room, I was just Brooklyn, the daughter, the caregiver, the eternal backup plan. My mother finally broke the silence. Her voice, usually soft and melodious, was brittle, like thin ice cracking under pressure. "We saw Dr. Albright this morning," she said. She picked up a glossy brochure from the mantelpiece and held it out to me. I didn't move to take it. I already knew what it was. For weeks they had been talking about it in hushed, excited tones. An experimental treatment, a dual surgery, a revolutionary procedure that could potentially restore most of my father's mobility and address the degenerative condition that had mysteriously appeared in my mother's own system shortly after. Something the doctors vaguely attributed to the stress and shock of his long-term care. It was their miracle cure, their golden ticket out of the quiet desperation that had defined their lives for the past 10 years. "It's very promising, Brooklyn," my father added, his voice a low rumble from the depths of his chair. "The best in the world are doing it, in Switzerland." "That's wonderful," I said, and I meant it. A part of me, the part that still remembered my father lifting me onto his shoulders to see parades, the part that remembered my mother humming as she baked, desperately wanted this for them. "I've been saving. I can cash out some investments. We can make it work." My mother let out a short, sharp sound that was almost a laugh, but it had no humor in it. It was the sound of a spring coiling too tight. "Brooklyn, dear, your savings are admirable for a person in your position. But we're not talking about a new stair lift. The cost is astronomical." She slid the brochure onto the coffee table between us. I glanced down at the number circled in red ink. It was a figure so large it seemed fake, like a number from a board game. It was more than the entire net worth of my restaurant. It was more money than I could ever conceive of seeing in one place. My stomach dropped. I felt the familiar cold dread that always preceded their big asks. For years, it had been a pattern. My car for a few weeks because theirs was in the shop. My savings for a new roof because their pension was tight that year. My time, my energy, my life. It was always given freely, because that's what you do for family, right? That's what I told myself. Family is supposed to be a sanctuary, not a sacrifice. I clung to that belief like a life raft. I don't know what to say," I stammered. "That's a lot. We'd have to look at loans, maybe fundraising." "No," my mother said, her voice dropping to a low, serious tone, the tone she used when she was about to deliver the killing blow in an argument. "No loans. We will not go into our final years as debtors. We will not be a charity case for our friends and neighbors to pity." She walked over and stood behind my father's chair, placing her hands on his shoulders, a united front, them against the world. Them against me. "There is another way," my father said, looking at me. His gaze wasn't unkind, but it was firm, absolute. It was the look of a man who had made a decision and would not be swayed. You have an asset, Brooklyn, a very successful one from what we hear, and there it was. The unspoken thing, the elephant that had been living in their house for the past 5 years, was finally named. My restaurant, the Gilded Spoon, my dream, my one thing that was truly mine, built in the stolen hours between caring for them and sleeping. I felt a wave of nausea. The spoon, I whispered. You want me to, what? Sell it, my mother said. The words sharp and clean, like a knife through soft butter. You sell the restaurant. The broker we spoke to said you could get more than enough for it, especially with that award you were nominated for. Enough for the surgery, the travel, the aftercare, enough for us to live. I stared at them, my mind a swirling vortex of disbelief and horror. Hey, Pole, I felt like I'd been punched in the gut, all the air forced from my lungs. Hey, Pole, sell. The Gilded Spoon? The thought was so monstrous, so utterly alien. It didn't compute. It was like asking me to sell a lung. It was a part of me. The brick and mortar, the scent of fresh bread from the oven, the hum of happy diners, the camaraderie of my staff. It was the life I had built for myself, when my other life, the one I had planned, had been taken from me. No, I said, the word catching in my throat. Absolutely not. There has to be another way. My father's face hardened. The gentle, weary man disappeared, replaced by a stern patriarch I hadn't seen in years. There is no other way. This is our one chance, Brooklyn. My one chance to walk again without this agonizing pain. Your mother's chance to not end up in a chair right next to mine. Are you going to deny us that? Of course not. But to sell my restaurant, my entire life, everything I've worked for? My voice was rising, trembling with a decade of suppressed frustration. I gave up everything for you once. I gave up Paris. I gave up Le Cordon Bleu. I stayed here. I took care of you both. I built this one thing for myself, on the side, without ever once neglecting you. And now you want me to burn it to the ground? My mother's eyes filled with tears, the practiced, perfect tears of a master manipulator. Oh, so that's it. You're throwing that in our faces now? Your duty? We didn't ask you to give up that school. That was your choice. We are your parents. We are asking for your help. We are in a life or death situation. And you're talking about your little hobby restaurant? A hobby. 5 years of 18-hour days, pouring concrete myself, because I couldn't afford a contractor, sleeping on a cot in the back office, the stress fractures in my feet, the burns on my arms, the constant, gnawing fear of failure, all of it my life's work, reduced to a little hobby. A dam inside me that had been cracking for years finally broke, but instead of a flood of anger, a strange, terrifying calm washed over me. I looked from my mother's tear-streaked face to my father's stony expression. They were serious. This was it. This was the transaction, my dream for their health. So this is an ultimatum, I said, my voice flat, devoid of emotion. My father nodded slowly. Your mother and I have talked about this for a long time. We need to know where we stand. We need to know if we are a family, united in a crisis, or if we are just individuals with competing interests. My mother delivered the final line, her voice now cold and steady. You sell the restaurant, and you save your father and me, or you keep it, and you walk out that door, and we don't want to see you or hear from you again. You'll be disowned. The choice is yours, Brooklyn. Disowned. The word hung in the air, sucking all the oxygen out of the room. It was so dramatic, so final. It was a word from a soap opera, not from the mouths of my own parents. I looked at their faces, searching for a flicker of doubt, a hint of hyperbole. I found none. They meant it. They had weighed my entire existence, my love, my decade of sacrifice, against their own needs, and found me wanting. They had placed my dream on the scales, and in their eyes it was lighter than air. I had built my life around them, and they were telling me that without my utility, my life had no value to them. And in that moment of perfect, horrific clarity, I made a decision. I looked at the two people who were supposed to love me unconditionally, who were now holding that love for ransom. Fine, I said, the word tasting like ash in my mouth. I'll sell it. The relief that washed over their faces was instantaneous and absolute. It wasn't relief mixed with sadness for my loss. It was pure, unadulterated victory. And that's when I knew. That's when I knew this was more than just a choice. It was a betrayal. My father's eyes softened, and he said, "You're a good daughter, Brooklyn." But the words were hollow. They didn't land, because a good daughter wouldn't have had to be threatened. A good family wouldn't have issued the threat. I walked out of that house, the glossy brochure for a Swiss clinic still sitting on the table, feeling like I had just signed my own death warrant. But a tiny cold spark had been lit in the pit of my stomach, a spark of something that felt dangerously like rage. I don't remember the drive from my parents' house. It's a blur of green trees and gray asphalt, my hands gripping the steering wheel so tightly my knuckles were white. My mind was a blizzard of static. The only thing I could hear was the echo of my mother's words, "Your little hobby restaurant." I didn't go home to my small apartment above a bookstore. I drove to the Gilded Spoon. It was late, well after closing, and the street was quiet. I let myself in through the back alley, the familiar click of the lock the only sound in the darkness. I didn't turn on the main lights. I just stood in the dining room, the moonlight filtering through the large front windows, casting long skeletal shadows across the empty tables. This was my sanctuary. Every chair, every polished wine glass, every scuff mark on the hardwood floor told a story. I ran my hand along the cool, smooth surface of the zinc bar I had installed with my own 2 hands. I had saved for a year for that bar. I remembered the day it was delivered, the sheer, unyielding weight of it, and the ridiculous, triumphant joy I felt when it was finally in place. I sank onto one of the bar stools, my body feeling boneless, and I finally let go. The sobs came from a place so deep inside me, I didn't recognize it. They weren't loud or hysterical. They were ragged, silent, gut-wrenching tears for everything I had lost and everything I was about to lose again. It felt like a funeral, and in a way it was. My mind started to drift backwards, unspooling the thread of my life, trying to find the exact moment it had all gone so wrong. It was so easy to pinpoint. It was a single sheet of thick, cream-colored paper with elegant embossed lettering, my acceptance letter to Le Cordon Bleu in Paris. I was 22, graduating at the top of my class, from the Culinary Institute of America. I was young, I was hungry, and I was in love with food and in love with Liam. I could see him so clearly in my mind's eye, leaning against the brick wall outside our dorm, a cocky grin on his face, a dish towel slung over his shoulder like a badge of honor. He had this raw, chaotic talent, while I was all about precision and technique. We were fire and ice, and we pushed each other, challenged each other, and dreamed of opening a restaurant together in Paris, the city of lights and food. When I got my acceptance letter, he was the first person I told. He picked me up and spun me around, whooping with joy. "We're doing it, Brooke. We're really doing it." It wasn't my dream or his dream. It was ours. Then came the phone call. 3 weeks before I was supposed to fly out. It was my mother, her voice frantic, hysterical. There had been an accident. My father, a contractor, had fallen from a second-story roof. He was alive, but it was bad. Shattered pelvis, spinal damage. The world tilted on its axis. I flew home that night. The hospital was a sterile, beige nightmare. My father was a ghost in a bed, hooked up to a symphony of beeping machines. My mother was a wreck, completely unable to cope. In the span of a single day, our lives were irrevocably altered. The doctors were grim. He would live, but he might never walk again without assistance. The recovery would be long, arduous, and expensive. He had insurance, but it was basic, not enough to cover the kind of long-term intensive care he would need. I stayed. Of course I stayed. I deferred my enrollment at Le Cordon Bleu for a semester, then another. Liam called every day at first. He was already in Paris, his voice full of excitement about the classes, the markets, the city. But our conversations grew strained. He was living our dream, and I was living a nightmare of sponge baths and insurance paperwork. He kept saying, "They'll be okay, Brooke. You have to come. You can't give this up." He didn't understand. He couldn't. His parents were healthy, retired, living in Florida. He didn't have this crushing weight of filial duty that had been drilled into me since birth. The day I made the final decision is seared into my memory. I was sitting at the kitchen table with my parents. My father was home, confined to a hospital bed in the living room. I had the withdrawal form from Le Cordon Bleu in my hands. I told them I wasn't going back. I was staying. I was giving up the scholarship. I don't know what I expected. Sorrow for my loss, gratitude, an argument even. What I got was quiet relief. My mother squeezed my hand, her eyes welling up. "Oh, thank you, Brooklyn," she'd whispered. "I don't know what we would have done without you." My father just nodded from his bed, a single tear rolling down his cheek. Their relief was all about them. It was about their burden being eased. My sacrifice, the death of my once vibrant future, was just a footnote in their tragedy. That was the day our roles were cemented. They were the patients. I was the caregiver. My breakup with Liam was a quiet, sad phone call. I told him I wasn't coming. He didn't fight me this time. He just said, "I'm sorry, Brooke. I really am." And that was it. 10 years of shared dreams evaporated over a transatlantic phone line. The years that followed were a blur of hard work and exhaustion. I became my father's legs, his hands. I managed his medications, his appointments, his physical therapy. I became my mother's emotional support, her rock, her errand runner. She seemed to shrink after the accident, becoming more and more dependent on me for everything. To make ends meet, I took a job as a line cook at a local diner. The grease and the sizzle, a pale imitation of the fine dining kitchens I had dreamed of. Then I took a second job, waiting tables at night. I saved every single penny. I lived in a tiny, cheap apartment, drove a beat-up car, and wore second-hand clothes. My life was a monotonous loop of caregiving and working. But the dream, the one I thought had died, refused to stay buried. It was a stubborn little ember glowing in the dark. I started experimenting in my tiny kitchen, sketching out menus on napkins, reading cookbooks like they were holy texts. The idea for the Gilded Spoon was born not in a moment of inspiration, but out of sheer, desperate necessity. I needed a place that was mine. I needed to create something, to build something, or I was going to disappear completely. I found a derelict little storefront on a forgotten side street. The realtor thought I was insane. It had been a laundromat, and it smelled of damp and decay, but it had good bones. I poured my entire life savings into the down payment. For 2 years I renovated it myself after my shifts, covered in drywall dust and paint. I called in favors from my father's old construction buddies. I learned how to tile, how to plaster, how to do basic plumbing from YouTube videos. It was a grueling, soul-crushing process. All the while, my parents were indifferent. They saw it as a foolish risk. "Are you sure about this, Brooklyn?" my mother would ask, her brow furrowed with concern. "It seems like a lot of work. You already have so much on your plate with us." They never once came to see the space while I was renovating it. Not once. I still remember the family dinner we had at my aunt's house, about a year before I opened. My cousin Marcus, a perpetually smug accountant, had just gotten a minor promotion at his firm. My parents spent the entire evening singing his praises.
"It's senior associate," my mother gushed. "Arthur, did you hear? He's on the partner track. Such a steady, respectable career." They beamed at him with a pride I had never once received. Later that evening, my aunt asked how my little project was coming along. Before I could answer, my father chimed in. "She's still playing with that old laundromat. Hopefully she doesn't lose all her money." He said it with a chuckle, as if it were a joke, but the sting was real. They saw Marcus, the safe, predictable man in a gray suit, as the success story. Me, the daughter who was literally building her dream from the ground up, was just a flighty, irresponsible child playing a game. When the Gilded Spoon finally opened, it was a slow start, but I worked. I put my head down and I cooked the best food I knew how to cook. Word of mouth spread. A local food blogger wrote a glowing review. Then the city paper. Soon we were booked out weeks in advance. The James Beard nomination was the culmination of everything. It was validation. It was proof that I hadn't made a mistake. I called my parents the day I found out, my voice shaking with excitement. My mother's response? "Oh, that's nice, dear. Don't forget to pick up your father's prescription on your way home." Click. Sitting there in the dark, in the silence of my beautiful doomed restaurant, all these memories coalesced into a single painful truth. I had never been their daughter. I had been their employee, their nurse, their safety net. My successes were irrelevant unless they could be leveraged for their comfort. My dreams were disposable. They didn't love me. They loved what I did for them. The foundation of my entire life, the belief that my sacrifice was born of love and duty, crumbled into dust. A phone buzzed on the bar, startling me. I looked at the screen. It was a text from my mother.
"We're waiting for your answer, Brooklyn. Don't be selfish." Selfish. The word hit me like a splash of ice water. All I had ever done was be selfless. I had sacrificed my education, my love, my youth, my money, my time. I had given and given and given, until there was almost nothing left of me. The one thing I had kept for myself, they now demanded as their right. And my refusal, my hesitation to light myself on fire to keep them warm, was selfish. The sadness that had been drowning me began to recede, replaced by something else, a cold, hard clarity. The tears stopped. I sat up straight, my spine stiffening. They had given me an ultimatum, a choice between my life and their love. But it was a false choice. The love they were offering wasn't real. It was conditional. It was transactional. And I was done with the transaction. I looked around my restaurant, at the beautiful, tangible proof of my resilience. They thought they could force me to destroy it. They thought I would crumble, but they had underestimated me. They had mistaken my kindness for weakness, for far too long. They wanted a sacrifice. Fine, I would give them a sacrifice, but it wouldn't be the one they were expecting. It wasn't about revenge, not yet. It was about survival. But as I stood up and walked towards the office, a new plan already forming in my mind, I had to admit, the thought of the look on their faces when they finally realized what I'd done, well, it was a powerful motivator. It wasn't about revenge, until it was. The next morning, I felt hollowed out, but possessed by a strange electric energy. I called my sous chef, Chloe. She wasn't just my employee, she was my best friend, my sister in the trenches. She had been with me since the beginning, since the days we were painting walls and dreaming of a real walk-in fridge. She came over to my apartment immediately, a bag of pastries and 2 large coffees in her hand. I told her everything, the ultimatum, the threat of being disowned, the cold, transactional nature of it all. I laid it out factually, my voice steady, because if I let any emotion in, I knew I would shatter. Chloe listened, her expression shifting from confusion to righteous fury. She was a fiery redhead with a temper to match, and her loyalty was fierce. "They did what?" she exploded, slamming her coffee cup down on the table. "Are you kidding me, Brooklyn? After everything? After Paris? After you practically raised yourself while raising them? They have the audacity to call you selfish." She was pacing my tiny living room like a caged tiger. "You cannot sell the spoon. You can't. We'll figure something out. We'll start a GoFundMe. We'll take out 1,000,000 loans. We'll sell my car. It's a decent Subaru. But you are not, under any circumstances, selling that restaurant." Her fierce defense of me, of our restaurant, was the balm my wounded soul needed. "I know, Chloe," I said, my voice finally cracking. "But you heard them. It's the restaurant or it's them. They'll cut me out completely, forever." "So what?" she shot back, stopping in front of me. "What exactly would you be losing? A support system? Unconditional love? Because it sounds to me like you've never had that from them anyway. It sounds like you'd be losing a pair of high-maintenance, emotionally manipulative employers, who you also happen to be related to." She was right. The brutal, painful truth of it hit me hard. Hearing it from someone else, someone who saw my worth so clearly, made it impossible to deny. But her words also sparked the flint of the idea that had been forming in the back of my mind. The idea that was both terrifying and thrilling. I have to sell it, Chloe, I said quietly. Her face fell. Brooke, no. Don't let them win. Don't let them take this from you. I'm not, I said. And for the first time, I looked her right in the eye, letting her see the steel that was forming there. I'm not going to let them win. I'm going to give them exactly what they asked for, but I'm going to do it on my terms. That afternoon, I locked myself in my office at the restaurant. For hours, I just stared at the wall, my mind racing. A sale had to look legitimate. It had to be a real transaction. I couldn't just magic the money out of thin air. I needed a buyer, a real one. But who would buy a restaurant, only to let the former owner continue to run it as if nothing had changed? It was a fantasy. Desperate, I opened my laptop. I went through my old contacts from culinary school. Most were scattered to the winds, working as chefs, food writers, or having left the industry altogether. I started drafting an email. It wasn't a for sale notice. It was more subtle. I framed it as a prospectus. I wrote about the Gilded Spoon's success, the James Beard nomination, the potential for expansion. I mentioned I was exploring options for a capital injection from a silent partner to facilitate the next phase of growth. It was corporate jargon, but it felt safer than admitting the truth. It was a message in a bottle, a wild Hail Mary. I picked 5 names from my contact list, people I remembered as being smart, ambitious, and honorable, and at the last second, my cursor hovered over one more name, Liam. I hesitated. We hadn't spoken in almost 10 years, aside from a few polite, awkward congratulations on social media posts. I knew from the food blogs that he was a massive success. He'd left Paris after a few years and moved to New York, where he had opened a string of critically acclaimed, wildly popular restaurants. He was a culinary titan now. Contacting him felt like a little rowboat trying to hail a battleship. It was presumptuous. It was humiliating. It felt like admitting that he had been right all along, that I had chosen the wrong path. But Chloe's words echoed in my head. What do you have to lose? I added his name to the list and I hit send. I closed the laptop, my heart hammering in my chest. I felt sick. I fully expected to hear nothing back. My phone rang 2 hours later. It was an unknown New York number. I almost didn't answer. Hello, Brooke? The voice was deeper than I remembered, but it was unmistakably him. Liam. A jolt went through me, a strange mix of terror and relief. Liam. Hi. I tried to sound casual, breezy, as if my entire world wasn't hanging by a thread. I got your email, he said, his voice direct. No small talk. A silent partner. That doesn't sound like you. You're a sole proprietor control freak. What's going on? He still knew me. That little detail, that he remembered my obsession with control, my need to have my hands on every aspect of my creation, it almost broke me. The truth just came tumbling out. I told him everything. The accident, the years of caregiving, the restaurant, the ultimatum, my parents' cold, calculated demand. I laid my pathetic, broken life at the feet of the man whose heart I had broken a decade earlier. When I finished, there was a long silence on the other end of the line. I thought he had hung up. Liam, are you there? I'm here, he said, his voice quiet, thick with an emotion I couldn't place. I'm looking at an article about you right now, a profile in Southern Plates magazine. There's a picture of you in the kitchen. You look happy and tired. He paused. I followed your career, you know, from a distance. I always knew you were better than all of us. I knew if anyone could build something from nothing, it was you. I'm so sorry, Brooke. I'm sorry for what they're doing to you. His sympathy, so genuine and freely given, was something I hadn't realized I was starving for. Thank you, I whispered. So, he said, his voice shifting, becoming more businesslike, more like the restaurant mogul he now was. Forget a silent partner. That's not what you need. You need a buyer, an anonymous one. My breath hitched. What are you talking about? I'm talking about this, he said, and I could hear him typing on a keyboard. I have a holding company. It's a generic, boring name. We use it to acquire real estate for new locations. It's completely anonymous. The company will make a formal offer to purchase the gilded spoon. I'll pay a premium, well over market value, enough to cover every last cent of that surgery and then some. The sale will be ironclad, handled by my lawyers. Your parents will get their money. I was speechless. I couldn't process the sheer scale of what he was offering. Liam, I can't ask you to do that. Why would you do that? Because, he said, and his voice softened again. I was an idiot when we were kids. I didn't understand what you were going through. I saw you choosing them over me, over our dream. It took me years to realize you weren't choosing them. You were just doing what you thought you had to do. You were being honorable, and they're punishing you for it. They want to destroy the one thing you built for yourself. I'm not going to let that happen. He took a deep breath. So here's the deal. My company buys the restaurant, but it comes with a condition. A non-negotiable term of the sale is that you, Brooklyn Hayes, are retained as executive chef under a 5-year contract. You get full 100% creative control. Nobody tells you what to put on the menu. Nobody tells you how to run your kitchen. You also get a salary. Let's say, triple what you're paying yourself now. My mind was reeling. I felt dizzy. Liam, that's insane. I'm not finished, he said. The final piece. The part they never need to know about. As part of your employment contract, you'll be granted a 20% silent partnership stake in the new LLC that owns the restaurant. It's your sweat equity. It's yours. They want you to sacrifice your dream. Fine. Let's give them the illusion of that sacrifice. But what we're really going to do is make your dream bigger, safer, and more profitable than ever before. How does that sound? I was crying again, but this time they were tears of disbelief, of overwhelming gratitude. It was a lifeline. It was a miracle. It was a plan so audacious, so perfect, it felt like something out of a movie. He wasn't just saving my restaurant, he was saving me. He was seeing my value, not as a caregiver or a good daughter, as a chef, an artist, a professional. He was validating the part of me my parents had tried so hard to diminish. Why? I asked again, my voice choked with tears. Why are you doing all of this? There was a long pause. When he spoke again, his voice was full of a decade of regret. Because I should have come home with you, Brooke. I should have stood by you then. I can't change that. But I can stand by you now. So what do you say? Are we in business? The next day, I had a video call with Liam and his lawyer, a sharp, no-nonsense woman named Miss Albright. Ironically, the same last name as my parents' doctor. She walked me through the legal structure. A new LLC would be formed in Delaware for anonymity. The purchase agreement would be handled through her firm. My employment contract and silent partnership grant would be a separate, private document, shielded from the sale itself. It was a fortress of legal protection. She explained how the funds would be placed in escrow and how the transfer to my parents would be handled by a third-party service, ensuring no direct link back to Liam or his companies. It was brilliant. It was real. As Miss Albright spoke, I felt a shift inside me. The fear and despair were being burned away by this new, fierce hope. I was taking control. I was no longer a victim of my parents' emotional blackmail. I was becoming the architect of my own liberation. I looked at Liam's face on the screen. He wasn't the boy I remembered. He was a man, confident and powerful, but his eyes were the same. They were full of belief in me. Okay, I said, my voice clear and strong. Let's do it. The first move was the hardest. I had to go back to my parents' house and perform the part of the dutiful, defeated daughter. I walked into that same living room, the air still thick with their expectations. I didn't sit down. I stood on that Persian rug, the battlefield of my childhood, and I looked them both in the eye. I've thought about it, I said, my voice a carefully constructed monotone drained of all life. You're right. Your health is the most important thing. I'll sell the restaurant. The change in them was instantaneous. The tension in my mother's shoulders vanished. A broad, genuine smile spread across her face. My father let out a long, slow breath, as if he'd been holding it for days. Oh, Brooklyn, my mother said, rushing forward to hug me. I stood stiffly in her embrace, my body rigid. Her hug didn't feel warm or loving. It felt like the embrace of a victor. "You've made the right choice. The only choice. I'm so proud of you. Proud of me for capitulating. Proud of me for surrendering my dream." The irony was so thick I could taste it. "I've already spoken to a broker," I lied, the words feeling surprisingly easy on my tongue. "He thinks he can find a buyer quickly. A corporate buyer, probably. An investment group." "That's wonderful, dear," my father said from his chair, his voice full of paternal benevolence now that he had gotten his way. "The sooner the better. Dr. Albright wants to schedule the procedures for next month." And just like that, it was done. The conversation moved on to logistics, to Switzerland, to recovery times. My sacrifice was already a footnote, a settled matter. They didn't ask how I was feeling. They didn't offer a single word of comfort for the monumental loss they had just forced upon me. They were already spending the money, my money, the blood money from the murder of my dream. I played my part, nodding along, feigning a sad, resigned expression. Inside, a cold fire was burning. The next few weeks were a masterclass in deception. Liam's lawyer, Miss Albright, was a genius. An official-looking letter of intent arrived from a generically named entity, Atlantic Hospitality Group. My parents insisted on seeing it. I showed them the letterhead, the impressive offer price, a number Liam had inflated by a good 30% over its highest valuation. They were giddy. The process of the sale was a strange, out-of-body experience. I was dealing with lawyers and accountants, signing reams of paperwork that would transfer ownership of my soul to a shell corporation owned by the man I'd once planned to spend my life with. My staff, my beloved kitchen family, knew something was up. Rumors started to fly. I had to call a meeting. I stood before them in the dining room, my heart aching. Chloe stood beside me, her expression grim. She was the only one who knew the truth, and she was playing her part beautifully, looking as worried as everyone else. "I know there have been a lot of rumors," I began, my voice thick with fake emotion, "and I wanted you all to hear it from me. I have to sell the Gilded Spoon." A collective gasp went through the room. My dishwasher, a sweet old man named Hector, looked like he was about to cry. "But why, chef?" he asked. "This place, it's a family. It's for family reasons," I said, the words tasting like poison. "It's a personal matter. The new owners are an investment group. I don't know what their plans are." The fear and uncertainty in their eyes was the hardest part of the charade. These people depended on me. They had believed in my vision, and now they thought I was abandoning them. Chloe put a comforting hand on my arm, a small, secret show of support. I wanted so desperately to tell them the truth, to reassure them, but I couldn't. Not yet. The illusion had to be perfect. My parents, meanwhile, were becoming insufferable. They called me daily, sometimes multiple times a day, not to ask how I was coping, but for updates on the sale. "Has the wire cleared yet, Brooklyn? Did the lawyers sign off on the final papers? Has. If I was minable or so. I hope your broker isn't dragging his feet." They treated me like their project manager, a hired hand tasked with securing their financial future. The panic in their voices was barely concealed. They were terrified something would go wrong, that their golden ticket would be snatched away. I dutifully reported back, playing the part of the stressed, heartbroken daughter, all while coordinating the final details with Liam and Miss Albright. The day the sale officially closed was surreal. I sat in a lawyer's office in Charleston signing the final document. A wire transfer for an astronomical sum of money was initiated from a bank in Delaware to an escrow account. It was done. The Gilded Spoon was no longer mine. I walked out of that building into the bright Charleston sun, feeling nothing. I was numb. I went straight to my bank and arranged the transfer. The full amount for the surgeries and associated costs, sent from the escrow account directly to a special medical fund my parents had set up. I emailed them the confirmation receipt without a single word. Their response was immediate. A phone call from my mother, her voice high and breathless with excitement. "Brooklyn, we got it. The money is there. Oh, sweetheart, you did it. You really did it. I told you I would," I said, my voice flat. "We're going to have a little get-together tonight," she chirped, completely oblivious to my tone. "Just a few close family members, to say thank you for your sacrifice." Sacrifice. There was that word again. The party was excruciating. My aunt, my uncle, my smug cousin Marcus. They all looked at me with a mixture of pity and admiration. "It's such a noble thing you've done, Brooklyn," my aunt said, patting my arm. "Your parents are so lucky to have you." Marcus, holding a glass of champagne, gave me a condescending smile. "Tough break about the restaurant, but hey, probably for the best. It's a brutal business, way too risky. Now you can find a nice, stable job, maybe do some catering on the side." I just smiled a tight, empty smile. My parents were the stars of the show, telling everyone about the miracle doctors in Switzerland, showing off the brochure like it was a winning lottery ticket. They toasted me, of course. "To Brooklyn," my father said, raising his glass, "for understanding what family is all about." They thought they had won. They thought they had successfully traded my dream for their future. They had no idea that the real game hadn't even started yet. As I stood there, accepting their hollow praise, I felt a profound sense of power. They were celebrating a victory, but they were 1,000 miles from the real battlefield, and the silent takeover was complete. The week after the sale was finalized was a strange limbo. The sign on the door of the Gilded Spoon read, "Closed for renovations, reopening soon under new management." The message sent a wave of panic through the local food scene and, more importantly, through my staff. I got a dozen worried texts a day. "Chef, have you heard anything? Do we still have jobs?" I had to lie to them, telling them I was as in the dark as they were. It felt awful, but it was a necessary part of the illusion. Chloe was my rock, fielding calls and backing up my story with a convincing performance of shared anxiety. My parents, flush with cash and the promise of their miracle cure, immediately began to redraw the map of my life. They had their surgery scheduled in 3 weeks. The day after their thank you party, my mother called, her voice full of cheerful assumption. "Brooklyn, dear," she began, "your father and I have been talking. Once we get back from Switzerland, the recovery is going to be quite intensive. It would be a tremendous help if you moved back into your old room for a few months, just until we're back on our feet." I stood in my small apartment, the phone pressed to my ear, and I felt a cold fury wash over me. The audacity was breathtaking. They had forced me to sell my business, my livelihood, my entire professional identity, and now, in their minds, I was unemployed. I was a blank slate, an empty vessel they could fill with their own needs. "Now that you don't have that restaurant distracting you, you'll have all the time in the world to help us," she continued, her voice light and airy. "It all works out for the best, doesn't it?" It was the final piece of evidence I needed, the ultimate confirmation that they saw me not as a person, but as a resource. My life only had value in relation to theirs. I took a deep, steadying breath. "Mom, I'll have to think about that. I need to figure out my own next steps first." "Next steps?" she asked, a hint of confusion in her voice. "What next steps?" "Your father and I are your next steps. We need you, Brooklyn. Family first. I'll call you back," I said, and hung up before she could reply. The power shift was coming. It was time. 2 days later, an email went out to all former staff of the Gilded Spoon from the Atlantic Hospitality Group. It was a formal invitation to a mandatory staff meeting to discuss the future of the restaurant and potential employment opportunities. The meeting was scheduled for the following afternoon. Liam flew into Charleston that morning. I met him at the airport. Seeing him in person for the first time in a decade was jarring. The lanky, cocky boy was gone, replaced by a man who moved with a quiet, solid confidence. But when he smiled, I saw a flash of the old Liam, the one who used to steal my whisk just to annoy me, ready to give the performance of a lifetime. he asked, his eyes twinkling. I was born for this role, I replied, and for the first time in weeks, my smile felt real. The staff meeting was held in the dining room of the restaurant. I arrived a few minutes early and stood with my team. I deliberately made myself look nervous, wringing my hands, avoiding eye contact. Chloe stood next to me, giving my arm a squeeze that was both for show and for real. The air was thick with tension. My people, my team, looked terrified. They were about to meet the faceless corporation that had bought their livelihoods. At precisely 2 p.m., the front door opened. Liam walked in. He was dressed in a simple but impeccably tailored dark suit. He looked every bit the powerful New York restaurateur. He didn't smile. He walked to the front of the room, his presence immediately commanding everyone's attention. Miss Albright, his lawyer, was with him, holding a leather portfolio. "Good afternoon," Liam said, his voice calm and clear, filling the silent room. "My name is Liam Peterson. I am the owner of the Atlantic Hospitality Group, and the new owner of this establishment." He let that sink in for a moment. He looked around the room, making eye contact with each and every person, including me. He gave me no sign of recognition. I was just another anxious face in the crowd. "I know there's a lot of uncertainty when a place like this changes hands," he continued. "So let me be clear. I didn't buy this restaurant to gut it. I didn't buy it to turn it into another soulless chain. I bought it because it is, in my professional opinion, one of the most exciting new restaurants in the country, and that is not because of the building or the location. It's because of the vision of the person who built it." He paused, and his eyes found mine again. My heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. "A restaurant is not just a business," he said, his voice resonating with passion. "It's a living, breathing thing, and its heart is its chef. The Gilded Spoon has a powerful heart, and I have no intention of performing a transplant. My first and most important act as the new owner is to ensure that heart keeps beating." He turned his body to face me directly. The entire room followed his gaze. I could feel dozens of pairs of eyes on me. "Which is why," he said, his voice ringing with authority, "I would like to formally offer the position of executive chef to Miss Brooklyn Hayes." A collective, stunned silence. "This offer comes with a 5-year ironclad contract," he continued, his eyes locked on mine. "It includes a salary that is commensurate with her talent and the restaurant's success. And most importantly, it includes a contractual guarantee of 100%, uncompromised creative control over the menu, the kitchen, and the culinary direction of this restaurant. No one will tell her what to cook. No one will interfere with her process. Her vision will be the law." He took a step towards me. "Brooklyn, the Gilded Spoon is your creation. It would be an honor if you would agree to stay and lead it into its next chapter. Will you accept?" For a moment I just stared at him, my mind catching up to the reality of the moment. This wasn't just a plan anymore. This was real. This was happening. I looked past him at the faces of my staff. Their fear was gone, replaced by gaping, astonished relief. Chloe's jaw was on the floor, her eyes wide with shock and dawning comprehension. I let out a shaky breath I didn't realize I'd been holding. I looked at Liam, the architect of my salvation. "Yes," I said, my voice clear and strong. "I accept." The room exploded. It wasn't just cheers. It was a roar of pure, unadulterated joy and relief. Hector was openly weeping and clapping. My line cooks were hugging each other, and Chloe launched herself at me, wrapping me in a fierce hug, whispering in my ear, "You magnificent, crazy, brilliant woman. I'm going to kill you." Later that evening, after the impromptu celebration had died down, and I'd signed my new contract in front of my entire beaming staff, I sat with Chloe at the bar. Liam had discreetly disappeared, leaving us alone. "Okay," Chloe said, shaking her head in disbelief as she polished a wine glass. "You have to tell me everything. The silent partnership, the salary, is all of that real?" I just nodded, a slow, wide smile spreading across my face. Every word. Her eyes went wide. "Oh my God, Brooklyn, you didn't just save the restaurant. You played them. You played them like a fiddle." Her shock melted into a grin of pure, conspiratorial glee. They think you're a destitute, heartbroken martyr. But you're a secret partner with a fat contract and total control. You're the queen in hiding. She started to laugh, a deep belly laugh of pure delight. This is better than revenge. This is poetry. And she was right. The power had shifted. It was no longer in my parents' hands. It was mine. The quiet, dutiful daughter was gone. In her place was a woman who had just discovered the beautiful, liberating power of her own worth. My parents just didn't know it yet, but they were about to. The news of my new position spread through Charleston's tight-knit community like wildfire. A local food blogger, the same one who had given me my first big break, posted a picture of me and my beaming staff on Instagram with the caption, "It's official. Chef Brooklyn Hayes is staying at the Gilded Spoon. New owner vows to keep the magic alive by retaining the master herself as executive chef, with full creative control. A class act, and great news for food lovers." The post exploded. My phone buzzed incessantly with congratulatory texts from friends and colleagues. It was validating, it was wonderful, but all I could think about was when the news would reach my parents. I didn't have to wait long. That evening my phone rang. It was my mother. I let it ring 3 times before answering, taking a deep breath and centering myself. "Hello, Brooklyn? What is the meaning of this?" Her voice was not the cheerful, chirpy tone of the past few weeks. It was sharp, accusatory, and laced with a confusion that bordered on panic. "Your Aunt Carol just sent me something from the internet. A picture of you. It says you're still working at the restaurant. Is this some kind of joke?" "No joke, Mom," I said, my voice even and calm. I was sitting at the zinc bar of my restaurant, swirling a glass of water. I felt a serenity I hadn't experienced in years. The new owner made me an offer to stay on as executive chef. I accepted. There was a stunned silence on the other end. I could hear my father's muffled voice in the background. "What is it, Helen? What's she saying?" "She's saying she's working for them," my mother shrieked, her voice pitching higher. "Brooklyn, how could you? After what they did. They took your dream from you, and you're just going to, what? Punch a clock for them. Have you no pride? We told everyone about your noble sacrifice, and now you're going back there as an employee. It's humiliating." The hypocrisy was so staggering, it was almost funny. They weren't angry for me. They were angry for themselves. My new job undermined their narrative. The story of the selfless daughter sacrificing her all for her ailing parents was a good one. It made them look tragic and loved. The story of the daughter who simply got a new job after selling her business was far less heroic. It made the whole transaction look, well, transactional. "My pride is just fine, Mom," I said coolly. "A job is a job. I need to work. This is not what we agreed to." My father boomed, having taken the phone from my mother. His voice was filled with a rage I hadn't heard since I was a teenager. "You were supposed to be free to take care of us. This was the whole point. You sold your restaurant so you could be available. You've betrayed our trust, betrayed their trust." The sheer, unmitigated gall of that statement sent a surge of icy calm through my veins. The final piece of the puzzle clicked into place. This was never just about the money for the surgery. The money was the excuse. The real prize for them was me, my time, my servitude. They wanted to dismantle my independent life so I would be forced back into the box they had built for me. The full-time, unpaid caregiver. "Let me be very clear, Dad," I said, my voice dropping, losing its fake pleasantness, and gaining a hard, steely edge. "We had a deal. You gave me an ultimatum. Sell my restaurant, or be disowned. I sold the restaurant. I held up my end of your twisted bargain. The money is in your account. Your surgeries are paid for. My obligations under the terms of your threat are fulfilled. What I do with my life and my career now is my business, and my business alone." "You lied to us," he yelled. "You let us believe you were giving everything up." "I never lied," I said simply. "You believed what you wanted to believe. You saw the narrative that suited you best, the suffering daughter. The idea that I might land on my feet, that I might be a talented professional that someone else would value, never even occurred to you, did it?" A sputtering sound came from the phone. They were floored. They had no response. They had lost control of the conversation, and they knew it. "I want you to come to the house. Now," my father commanded. "We will sort this out." "No," I said. The word was simple, clean, and absolute. "I'm not coming over. There's nothing to sort out." I paused, letting the silence stretch. Then I delivered the first part of the real truth. "This is my restaurant, Dad. Not in name, perhaps, but in soul. The new owner understands that. He's given me a 5-year contract and complete creative control. I'm not going anywhere." My mother snatched the phone back. Her voice was a desperate, pleading wail. "Brooklyn, please. You're throwing away your life for nothing. For a paycheck. You had a dream, your own place, and you let them take it." And there it was, the perfect setup, the moment I had been waiting for. I stood up and walked to the front window of the restaurant, looking out at the Charleston streetlights blinking on in the dusk. "Throwing it away?" I asked, a small, genuine smile playing on my lips. "Oh, Mom, you have it all wrong." I let the silence hang for a beat, savoring the moment. "I'm not just the head chef. That was just the public announcement." "What are you talking about?" she whispered. "As part of my contract, I was granted a silent partnership. I own 20% of this restaurant. Free and clear. I also have a salary that's more than you paid for your house, by the way. I didn't sacrifice my dream. I leveraged it. I upgraded it. You forced me to sell, so I found a buyer who understood my worth far better than you ever did." Absolute, dead silence on the other end of the line. I could practically hear their minds short-circuiting, trying to process the information. The entire foundation of their victory, their control, their narrative of my martyrdom, had just been vaporized. I hadn't been defeated. I had orchestrated the entire thing. I was more powerful, more successful, and more independent than ever before. "You tricked us," my father finally stammered, his voice small, baffled. "No," I said, my voice quiet but firm. "You gave me an ultimatum, and I found a way to survive it. You got what you wanted. You have the money for your surgery, and I got what I wanted. I have my restaurant, my career, and my freedom from your control. It seems we both got exactly what we deserved." I could hear my mother start to cry, and Mozart the tree that these weren't her practiced, manipulative tears. These were the harsh, ugly sobs of genuine shock and loss. Not loss of a daughter's love, but loss of a prized possession, loss of their power over me. He's come to beden van Vutizi. Save. Os events imoso. The funds for your treatment are secure, he said, delivering the final lines of our long, tragic play. "I wish you both good health, but our relationship, the one you held for ransom, is over. The price was too high. Goodbye, Mom. Goodbye, Dad." I ended the call. I didn't block their numbers. I just set my phone down on the bar. I knew they wouldn't call back. Not right away. Their world had been turned upside down. Their power was gone. Their martyr was a queen. Their victim was the victor. They were left with nothing but their miracle cure, and the cold, hard realization that they had sold their daughter's love for it. And as I stood there, in the quiet of my kitchen, surrounded by the dream they had tried to take from me, I felt a weight I didn't even know I was carrying lift from my shoulders. For the first time in a decade, I could finally, fully exhale. It's been 6 months since that final phone call. My parents went to Switzerland. The surgeries, from what I heard through the family grapevine, were a resounding success. My father can walk with a cane now, and my mother's condition has stabilized. They got their miracle. They live in that same house, with the lavender potpourri and the old books, but I hear it's much quieter now. The relatives who once praised my noble sacrifice now speak in hushed whispers about my parents' cruelty. They see the truth now. My cousin Marcus tried to make a reservation at the Gilded Spoon last month. My hostess politely informed him there was a 6-month waiting list. The restaurant, now officially known as the Gilded Spoon by Brooklyn, is thriving beyond my wildest dreams. With the capital injection from Liam, we were able to do a full kitchen renovation, expand the dining room, and even build a small rooftop garden where I grow my own herbs. Liam is the perfect partner, truly silent. He trusts my vision implicitly and handles the business end, leaving me free to do what I love, create. He's in New York most of the time, but he flies down once a month. Our relationship is new. It's not the fiery, youthful romance of our past. It's something quieter, deeper, built on a foundation of mutual respect and shared history. It's a work in progress, and for the first time in my life, I feel like I have the space to let it grow naturally. My team is happier than ever. Chloe is now my official chef de cuisine, and seeing her run the line with such confidence and joy is one of the great pleasures of my life. The fear is gone. The restaurant is a place of creativity, collaboration, and security. It's a true sanctuary. For so long, I believed that love meant erasing yourself. I thought that being a good daughter meant making myself smaller, quieter, less ambitious, so I wouldn't inconvenience the people I was supposed to care for. I thought family was an obligation you had to pay, a debt that could never be settled, no matter the cost to your own soul. But I was wrong. The gilded spoon taught me that. Liam's incredible act of faith taught me that. Even my parents' ultimate betrayal taught me that. True family, whether it's the one you're born into, or the one you build yourself in a hot, loud kitchen, is supposed to lift you up. It's supposed to be the net that catches you, not the cage that holds you. True family never asks you to set yourself on fire just to keep them warm. In the beginning, my plan wasn't about revenge. It was a desperate act of self-preservation. But I have to admit, in the end, the outcome was sweeter than any dessert I've ever created. They wanted me to be a martyr, suffering for their sake. But my success, my happiness, my freedom, that became the ultimate rebuke to their narrative. Living well on my own terms, in a life that I built, that I saved, and that I now own a piece of, turned out to be the most profound and satisfying revenge of all. So I want to ask you all, have you ever been faced with an impossible choice? Have you ever had to choose between your own dream and a family obligation that felt more like a demand? Let me know your story in the comments below. I read every single one, and if my story resonated with you, please give this video a like, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories about finding your strength when the world tries to take it away. Thank you for listening.